Grand Rising. This is Ron. It's Sunday morning, July 13th, a little after 11 a.m. Go ahead and get started. See if we have any questions about anything. Anything at all. Anything we talked about yesterday, anything that may have gotten your attention. No one? Okay.
I'd
Uh,
like to ask,
of course.
this is Ramel. Good morning, everyone. Um, I gave some thought to what was talked about yesterday, but what came into my mind and I need some clarity on is somehow it made me think of the Cain and Abel. I'm going to call it story.
Okay.
In the sense that you choose between, let me see if I can explain this. You choose between being a caring entity of the universe versus Cain, who was all about what he wanted. Can I make that analogy like that? Or they're not really that related?
Uh, and someone please help me with this, but not only do I think they're related, I think those are uh, internal battles that we have every day, each and every one of us, in our decision making, in our process. Uh, we battle with selfishness, or we battle with greed. We battle with what we have been taught is important. Uh, we have been taught to live uh, based on every man for himself, sort of, and to accumulate as much stuff and money and whatever as you can. We have been raised or trained, if you will, to see God in a certain manner, and God is uh, something has become something that can be controlled and do what we wish it or him to do. So yeah, I think that is I think looking at Cain and Abel in that regard is something that is not only uh, you're right on target, but I think that kind of looks at who and what we are. It is an opportunity to go through an awakening, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. That
Anyone
helps.
else on Ramel's question about Cain and Abel? See if we can get some more insight, Ramel.
Well, this is Audrey. When we talk about the Bible, we always say it's concepts, not
Hmm.
exactly people. So Cain and Abel are concepts of good and evil, for lack of a better word. And yeah, they do apply to us. And we struggle with those things every day. So I agree, Ron.
Thank you.
And just tying that together, Audrey, that is when Barbara was teaching about, when we did a lot of talking about duality, that is the essence of the Cain and Abel story, too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think all of these, if you notice, we never finish anything. We everything grows in us. And today, for an example, Vermil's question further fertilizes the seed of all that we've looked at that several times, and it grows and grows and grows until we shows us what we are becoming. So I love those questions where we go back and look at something more because we always look at another layer of it or explain it in a different way. But all of it not only speaks to us, it speaks to where we are in this place and time and the things that we see and deal with on a daily basis. So, and it helps us to see that everything is spiritual as well. Anyone else? Good question. Anyone else? Okay. Um,
Can anybody summarize what we talked about yesterday?
anyone, please, volunteers? Because I'd be honest with you, Audrey, if I were to say it, I would volunteer you that you were a pastor. You probably could remember better than anyone else.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We talked a lot about the relationship between masculine and feminine and the reestablishment of
Speak
the.
up a little bit, Nick, please.
Oh, okay. We talked about the relationship between the masculine and feminine and the reestablishment of the feminine as the what is necessary for and also an indicator of the return to harmony and balance in the earth. And a lot of other things. And I mentioned that by the time we have males or this sort of masculine principle wanting to lead or be dominant, it's indicative of things having already become out of balance or indicative of there already being a problem within the society or the group consciousness or awareness itself. So the return to a state of balance is very much represented by female and the feminine principle being in a position of leadership or authority rather than the masculine or male principle. Thank you.
In addition to that, we talked about also the video that was shown, and that we talked about the idea of feminine energy or the African female being the source of all life in the earth. And in doing so, we brought up the principle that is in the scriptures that's totally wrong. When it says that Eve was made from the rib of Adam, which says that the male was the first in the earth, when in essence, in reality, it was the female, because all humans came from the womb of an African woman. Therefore, this Adamic principle, or this masculine principle of being the initiator of life, is totally off base. And in addition to that, when the narrator in the video was talking about Africa coming out of the African as opposed to the reverse, in essence, what he was saying is that the African is the God from which Africa came, meaning that Africans were spiritual beings before they were physical beings. Therefore, the spiritual essence of the African brought into existence the physical earth of Kabbalah before there were any humans in the earth. So the idea of a Kabbalah coming into existence was brought into existence by the spiritual essence of the African, and that was truly the nursery for humanity that subsequently came from the African womb. And we talk also about the idea of marriage being a method of male manipulation having its principles derived from the European mindset and is a system of male manipulation of females, a method of control that we don't often pay any attention to. And we gave examples of course, of how that marriage control thing works and how the female has been subjugated to the domination of males throughout, not throughout history, but throughout the history of Europeans invading Africa. And when I say invading Africa, I'm not just talking about the continent of Africa, but I'm talking about all land masses because Africans were the first people on every land mass on every continent in the world. So that the idea of this European mindset was detrimental to the balance in the earth. We didn't too much get into it. However, I do believe that, as we've talked about before, the European destruction of balance in the earth came for a purpose. It was allowed, rather, for a purpose. And the reason it was allowed is so that the spiritual African who brought into existence Africa or Kabbalah was put in the space of being God in the earth and becoming God in a physical form in the earth. It was necessary for the physical form of Elohim to bring into balance the earth itself. However, it could not do that and fully become Elohim in the physical body unless it created in its image and likeness. And it had already brought other humans into the earth in a physical likeness, but that had to be a spiritual image of loving kindness brought into the earth as well. And that having been brought into the earth in the beginning through the African was solid by the European mindset. And now we are in the process of bringing balance in a more uniform manner, a balance that will civilize the uncivilized mind of the European mindset. I'm done. Unless questions, comments. Does that help, Audrey, in terms of summation?
Yes. And I have a question. I don't know if it's relevant, but I think it is relevant. So we talked a little bit about the European with the Neanderthal genes. So, and we know that Africans don't have Neanderthal genes. So in itself, that is evidence of two different species of physical man. So where did Neanderthal come from if it didn't come out of Africa? That's my question.
I have theories about that. I'm going to let the anthropologists approach that in a few moments. But I have theories about that. One of them is that the genetic makeup of the Neanderthal had to have been spiritual first. And that spiritual energy, having been brought into the earth by the Creator for the express purpose of creating, bringing to existence a substance to be created in the earth. For example, what I'm saying is this: I created the light, I created the darkness, right? So what I am saying is that the Neanderthal is the chaos, and that Neanderthal, the chaotic energy of the Neanderthal was embraced by the European, and it manifested itself in a physical genetic form, just like the spiritual essence of the African became manifested itself in a physical form. And that's my spiritual theory about it. I also believe that what fostered it was the absence of melanin, because the more the when we look at the melanated people, and we look at them from Africa through Japan, all of Asia really, and what we began to see is a lightening of the skin in order to fit with to adjust to the environment. However, we also know that that there were mutations that took place, and the genetic mutations that took place gave rise to a lighter skin, and the lighter the skin, the more absent the man is from the sun, the less it is melanated. And when it gets to the European, it is not melanated at all. It's just have melanocyte, but they have lost the enzyme that converts, that allows the sun to convert melanocyte into melanin. So that's how I see the Neanderthal having been brought into the earth, which means that all of it was allowed by the Creator for the express purpose of Elohim in its physical form, being able to create in its physical form with a mindset of Africa, as opposed to the opposite, which is chaos. And I know I used a lot of words, but does it make sense? Was it clear?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when I was young, I always asked the question about in the Cain and Abel story, when Cain was banished, and he always said, if I go out there, they will kill me.
Yes.
I always wanted to know who's they.
That's what got me in trouble at church too.
There's only Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, then who are they out there?
Yeah.
And nobody would ever answer the question.
That was my high school question in church. Nobody answered. Say we're not supposed to understand everything about the Bible. Have you
Right.
heard that before?
So, no, I just think it's intriguing that this is evidence of two species of men,
Yes. And
two different species of men.
yeah. So, anthropologists, what do you think about what we are talking about?
Hopefully my microphone is a little better now. But I speaking strictly anthropologically, the common ancestor of quote unquote modern humans and Neanderthals would have been much further back. And so by the time you have the differentiation between Africans and Neanderthals, it's kind of like they're almost different species. But I agree. I think, well, spiritually speaking, if we look at the story of Genesis and the Bible overall as the story of the evolution of the development of the consciousness of human beings in the material experience, what we see are the ways in which that consciousness changed over time and developed over time to sort of better prepare human beings for carrying out our purpose individually and collectively. So, for example, when Cain is talking about they, it's to sort of relate that to the Neanderthal concept. It's kind of like that is like a physical form that is less suited for the spirit of man to efficiently carry out its purpose for being here in the earth and the physical experience itself. So when we talk about there already being people outside of the Garden of Eden from the literal story, we're spiritually talking about a group of beings, and this is my understanding of this, a group of beings who had not made certain developments in their capacity for awareness that the people, quote unquote, in the Garden of Eden had developed. So it's kind of like two different groups of consciousness that were in the earth, and both of them sort of had the same not necessarily potential, but sort of the same orders, for lack of a better term, which is evolve and know thyself. And one of them, there's a consciousness that is better suited to that. There's a physical form that is better suited to that purpose. And that is what we see in the sort of lineage coming out of the Garden of Eden, and ultimately results in the story of the Bible, which is the story of the development of the consciousness of man, particularly within Africa. So it's all those little clues to there being more to the story, like when Cain says they outside or they over there that we've never heard of before. There are more clues like that to the full story of the development of the consciousness of human beings in the earth than we are sort of directly given information about, at least in the Bible as we know it, and as it has been given to us within the context of Christianity. So I also believe there have been instances where the development of different species of humans was catalyzed or encouraged by beings who exist in other planes of existence, when it seems like a particular branch of human beings were more likely to develop a certain type of consciousness. And in that case, you have, just to make the simple distinction, African consciousness, which is much more biased towards harmony and balance and the experience of unity with all things, versus the quote unquote Neanderthal consciousness, which is much more biased towards competition and seeking to dominate, as a way of describing the difference between these sort of lineages of consciousness as they exist within the earth, and how they sort of interact with each other. Thank you.
Suppose, Ron, you go say something?
Yeah, but mine is only going to add confusion. So I guess I'm looking at it and I'm trying to understand it, because I think that was a awesome question. And one of the things that has always sort of intrigued me but been a question is when he says they will do this to me. it almost sounds as though the Adam and Eve and the version of making man in my own image was newer than the they, that the they came first. And that has always been a point of confusion for me. The other one was I've always kind of agreed with something Nick said, and I think I'm saying agreeing with what Nick said. What if men were made uh, on different planes in different type of levels or worlds, if you will, and this is what we're seeing now is them coming together, seeing that coming together. So uh, I don't know. I guess I didn't help any, but it's always been an intriguing question for me as well.
Um, I honestly see what you're saying, and that will give rise to what the Dogon said,
Yeah.
that they came from Sirius too. So, but however, looking at it through the eyes of the writer about Cain and Abel, I have let me say this first. I have been searching for the a copy of the Bible that was written of the excuse me. I have been searching for the Bible or the sacred writings that were written before they were manipulated. There is a Bible out there that was manipulated um, later on, meaning that there are aspects in that of the Bible. For example, um, there are a group of people in that Bible who wrote that Bible, rather those sacred writings, who lived in um, an area of Africa that is to this day undeveloped. And when um, the British went into Africa, they tried to destroy them. And the same thing happened in 48, but they could not locate all of them. And they still have those sacred writings. And it is from those sacred writings that the Bible was manipulated. And there was no mention in the original writings of anything about Ham being cursed. None of that was in there. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying to you that I'm questioning whether this idea of Cain and Abel and the they that was mentioned is representative of what was actually there. Suppose that Cain and Abel were concepts that represented the mindset of the Neanderthal Cain and the mindset of the African Abel. And in the end, and what we are calling a European mindset is actually the mindset of a Neanderthal, because that Neanderthal have traces of melanin that is called melanocyte without the presence of the enzyme that's necessary for the sun to convert the melanocyte into melanin. Just like the absence of the genes of a Neanderthal with the African, the absence of melanin with the Neanderthal. Are you seeing what I'm talking about? The foundational structure of all humans came out of Africa, but the genetic mutations are different than the African genes. The strongest genetic system, a genetic foundation for life in the earth is the African genes. No question about that. Go ahead, Ron.
So the they that he refers to, or the conceptually looking at this, would be that the Africans, right?
Yes,
Don, okay,
I'm saying that what he's saying, what this concept is saying, that if if I go out there, I'm going to be killed, meaning that if you take this into if you take this BS into this group of people, and I'm putting it, of course, as simple as I can,
yeah,
if you take this in the midst of them, it ain't gonna fly.
yeah,
So what I'm doing, I'm going to give you I'm going to put a mark on you, meaning that this concept is going to be allowed to function in the midst of the people of African descent. And they will not destroy this concept. Why? Because in order for you in a physical form to become the total essence of Elohim, you have to create in your image and likeness. Are you with me so far? Come
say
on.
that again. I'm trying to get
In
the
order
why.
for you are spirit, right?
Right,
And you are the spirit nature essence of you is Elohim, right?
right,
But you also have a human mind, human mindset. And that human mindset is not dominated by the African mindset or the Neanderthal. It has a choice to make. And in order for the human to be Elohim, the choice that it makes has to be to embrace the mindset of the African, of Elohim. Are you with me so far?
yeah,
The mindset of the Neanderthal became the dominant mindset on purpose. The Creator allowed it to happen so that the African in physical form could create in his image and likeness, meaning that it was creating in his image and likeness a mindset that overshadowed the mindset of the Neanderthal, the mindset of peace and harmony from the African, as opposed to the chaotic, brutal, uncivilized mindset of the Neanderthal. Does that make sense?
yeah. I got it now. It
So,
does.
so go ahead.
No, it does make sense. I'd never seen it that way before.
Okay. So continuing this, what I'm saying in essence is this: um, the continent, not continent, the landmass, because Europe is not a continent. The landmass of Europe, where did it come from? Europa, a queen out of Africa, female out of Africa. Her name was Europa, and that's where Europe got its name. That's who named it, that landmass Europe. So this African female naming this landmass Europe is one thing. But for us to talk about the European mindset is a bit different than what we're talking about when we talk about the Neanderthal. So what my contention is that we should be looking at this more of a Neanderthal mindset as opposed to a European mindset.
Yeah,
Because when we look at it as a European mindset, then if Ron has a European mindset, then we are saying that Ron thinks like somebody from Europe. However, if Ron has a Neanderthal mindset, then Ron thinks like one who had its origin in Europe. Because the African was in Europe, but its origin was not in Europe during the period that it was called Europe. African was on every landmass in the earth. Am I making sense? Or am I confusing you more?
no, you're not confusing me. I do have a question for you though. What do you know about Eurotha? A reason why I ask is, can it be, is it safe to say that if something has a characteristic like your name is James, James has certain characteristics, and those characteristics will, no matter who and what you try to make yourself, James, you'll one day recognize who you are. Does that carry over with the name of
It has to. What I'm saying is this. Just like there is a mindset of a Kabbalah, of love, of peace, balance, etc. There is a Neanderthal mindset of destruction, murder, barbarian, which is antithetical to the mindset of a Kabbalah. Now, if the Kabbalonians are all over the earth, then it would be a misnomer to say that it is the European mindset as opposed to being a mindset of the Neanderthal. Because to say that it's the European mindset would be saying that everyone who occupied Europe had that same mindset, and that's not true. Because the African left Europe because of the barbaric nature of what we are calling Europeans, but it was the barbaric nature of the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal was the caveman.
yeah.
So we're talking about Neanderthals versus humans, actually. That's what we're talking about. So when we look at it from that perspective, the objective is to create the mindset of the African in the Neanderthal, which means that we would have created an image and likeness. And it's not necessarily talking about what you look like physically, but how you process spiritually. Does that make sense? Questions, comments? I don't want this to be a dialogue on this point between Ron and me. I want to see if there are questions or comments. And I'm sure he's not looking for the same thing.
Can I say something, Pastor?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just sitting here thinking, and when I think about this in terms, I think about it almost like a spider web. And when you look at it like a spider web, you think about how a spider web changes directions, and at the same time, if you look at a spider web, each spider web has an intersecting point where it changes direction and goes another way. And if we look at Cain and Abel and things like that, and everybody and every character, every person that is portrayed in the Bible and throughout Scripture, every person, every place as a point or in an intersection, and that person takes what they have experienced and took that and then took from that point and went in another direction. And when we think about the story of Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel, but at the same time, now they're in the garden, this place that's supposed to be, a place of a place where God is, or how everybody assumes that the garden is. But at the same time, he was still able to kill Cain in the garden. You know what I'm saying? And so with all the knowledge that he knew, he was still able to make that decision and to decide to kill him. And then when he was asked about it, his response. And so I think when we think about those types of man, every person represents a type of consciousness. And then what you take from when you intersect with those different, each line represents a person and their path. And when you take that path and y'all intersect, and you take what you've gathered from that person or what you've taken in, and you make your decision, and now it takes you on a whole nother type of consciousness. And then when he left the garden, he said they would kill him. He didn't die. The story of Cain didn't end after he left the garden. He took his consciousness and went out outside the garden, and his consciousness started to spread based on who he interacted with and who learned from him, and vice versa.
Okay.
And so when I think about,
Leslie, go ahead.
And so, like when I think about that type of that's no different than what we face today. Because every day we have a choice to take on what type of consciousness that is in the world, or what type of consciousness that we are learning to try to move towards. You know, we can say, okay, I see that they're doing this over here and they're prospering. Should I live like them, or should I think like them? Should I have that type of consciousness? And like even with the ways of Africa, there are people today that still live, still practice the things that they've learned from their grandfathers and great grandfathers and things like that right here in America. But at the same time, there are also people who came from Africa and left everything behind that they learned. Because they've taken that type of consciousness and they're like, I'm gonna move like this now. I'm gonna think like this, I'm gonna operate like this. And so I think it comes down and I mean it comes back to free will, because we all have, and it's not something that I decide today I'm gonna walk this walk. If somebody comes to me at the gas station, I may get off this walk and say if they say the wrong thing. I could get off this walk and then my path will go a totally different direction. Depends on my actions and what I do or what I say. And then tomorrow or the next 15 minutes after you leave the gas, it's a constant thing where your path can take you from one place, like one decision in split seconds can take you somewhere else. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. However, when you're talking about the spider web and the changes that take place based upon interaction, I see that more as differentiation in different cultures. Because there are only two mindsets in the earth. And one is that of the Neanderthal, and one is that of the African. And everything else becomes a subset of each one of those mindsets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you have an African mindset of loving kindness, peace, and harmony, then the subset of that becomes your cultural experiences, as well as your sense of right and wrong. If you have a Neanderthal mindset, then that the subset of that is in search of a culture because it's not there. Because the main thing that Neanderthals were engaged in was murder, rape, thievery, but not developing a foundational mindset that would bring peace and harmony into the earth. Culture is the foundation of culture is peace and harmony. If you look at the Neanderthal mindset in the period that we are in now, cultures are appropriated by them, not developed by them, but they are appropriated by them, meaning that they steal from other cultures and call it their culture, like country music, or like religion. The nature of spirituality was stolen and it became religion, which is a method of enslavement, manipulation, etc. So when you talk, so what I'm saying in essence is this, that you either are in search of a mindset of peace and harmony, or one of destruction. Now, when we look at how religion has functioned in our lives, what we see is that we have been dominated in our thought processes by a mindset of by an uncivilized mindset. Is what we have been governed by, eye for an eye, that kind of thing. Uncivilized mindset, saying that war is the way to peace. Uncivilized mindset, I want what you have and I'm going to take it by any means necessary. And I'm going to make sure that you are unable to to retain any control over what you own. Example, right now, there's an effort to convince us that there are white South Africans. There is no such thing as a white South African. That is a European who stole land in South Africa, and they are the generations after the thieves and they still maintain that the land that they stole, meaning that if you stole my house in 1898 and all your children kept my house, that's still my house. You stole it, you're living in it. You can't call yourself a Richard because you stole my house and you're living in it. You're a thief, regardless. So just because Europeans went in there and stole land, it did not make them Africans. It did not make their children African. It made they are Europeans who live in Africa. Does that make sense, Don?
Yeah.
So the mindset is the thing that we are dealing with. You're in Africa, but you don't have an African mindset. You have a Neanderthal mindset. So the geographical location of your body does not determine what your mindset is. It is the process through which you think and interact with other people that determines the status of your mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All of you, really. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
So what we are talking about here is totally different in terms of the spider web example that you gave.
Gotcha.
I'm done. And I wondered if there are any of you who are listening and has not raised a question. If you don't understand, you don't have to put in word like, this is my question. Just say, I don't understand about blah, blah, blah. And let us, take it to, do what we can rather to bring you understanding. So what would your question be about this? Or your comment?
I have a question to ask, and I don't know if you had stated it earlier. If the Neanderthal and the Africans were two different human species, my question is, was was Earth Africans' first place, or did we come here?
Based upon what we see from history and what we see from spirituality, the African has always existed in spirituality, always. And when the African was placed with the Alkebulan, which is the whole earth, when Alkebulan was created, it was created for what was to become humans. And the first ones to become humans were Africans out of an African womb. And Africans populated every landmass on earth. And from the African came genetic differences based upon the geographical location in the earth, and that was that was based upon weather patterns, or should I say, not weather patterns, climate conditions. It was based on climate conditions. So the whole earth was a Alkebulan, and every entity of human was African. However, the genetic makeup of all entities was different because of the influences of the energy in the earth coupled with the climate conditions of the earth. Does that make sense?
It does.
Does it also include the thought processes of that entity?
Absolutely.
Because,
Yeah.
you have to think before it comes into being, yes?
Yes. And the embracing of the chaotic energy is what we are talking about when we talk about the Neanderthal. What changes your genetic makeup? All people came from Africans. Are we down with that? We're down with that.
Yes.
Yeah, all humans, yeah.
Yeah, all humans came from Africa. All humans coming from Africans does not mean that all humans have African genes to this day. African woman has a genetic, the genetic makeup of every species of human on the earth. I'm sorry, of every race on the earth, what has been called race, okay? Every group of people on the earth, the only one who carry the gene for them, all of them are African females. Are we with that? So if all of them being African, the African female carrying the genes for every person on this, every human on this earth, it doesn't mean that every human on this earth carries all the genes for Africans. Because the Japanese do not have every gene for every human on the earth, but the African woman does. Does that make sense? So what happened? There appears to be a filtering of genes, does it not? Of the gene pool. Does it not? It has to be. Because a Swedish woman does not have the genes of an African woman. Does she? No. Because she does not have the genes of a Japanese, but the African woman does. She does not have the genes of Native American, but the African does. So what I'm saying is this: there is a filtering of the genes based upon several factors. One of the factors is climate. Another factor is spiritual, and that spiritual factor is energy. And when these genes are filtered, the question becomes, what does this human have an affinity for? If you go beyond the invasion of Africa and you begin to look at Asia, you do not see the barbaric or the Neanderthal gene there. You begin to see the Neanderthal gene in Asia when you begin to see the development or the genetic makeup of Arabs. That's when you see the Neanderthal and Asian genes become one. But you do not see that that in the African gene. Does that make sense? What I'm
Yes.
saying in essence is this, is that the Arab has the genetic makeup of a Neanderthal also. The African,
Pastor,
the African is the only human on earth who does not have any Neanderthal genes.
Pastor Jay, speaking of genes, doesn't everything you're talking about goes back to Henrietta Lack?
No. No, what I'm talking
No.
about goes back much further than Henrietta Lack.
Well,
Well,
I'm thinking about the African female
No, that's not what I'm
and
talking about.
how.
Wait, well,
Okay.
I don't want to conflate what you're talking about by Henrietta Lack with bringing healing to the body and developing cures for illnesses. I'm talking about the mindset and how this mindset developed in the earth. And I'm talking about the mindset of the African and the mindset of the Neanderthal. And I want to keep it there for this, for the points that we are trying to make. Okay, Evelyn?
I got you. Okay.
Now, why is it that the biggest battle in the earth, and always have been since the invasion of Africa, is between the what we subsequently what we previously had called the European, but actually it's the Neanderthal mindset. Why is it that everything in the earth turns on the interaction between the African and the Neanderthal? Everybody in between, the Asian, the Chinese, the Hawaiian, everything in between, the Philippines, Filipinos, none of that comes into play when it comes into political policy, when it comes into subjugation. None of those come into play. But the major battle is between the African mindset and that of the Neanderthal. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
So why is that so? Because the two major mindsets are Neanderthal and African. And they are diametrically opposed to each other. Because the Neanderthal does not have melanin, and the African has more melanin than anyone, and no Neanderthal genes at all.
Can I make a distinction though between the names? I think this might be important. I don't know. The two names, Akebalon was based on unity and love and compassion and community and those sort of things. The history of the name Africa was based on selfishness and division and destruction and greed. So to continue to call it Africa is saying the characteristics then of the Neanderthal. Am I right?
You are right.
If we are to get back on a spiritual plane of what it was intended to be or was originally, not intended to be, but what it is originally, and bringing that to the present, then understanding the name of Akebalon and what that means spiritually supersedes the name Africa. We have been taught to embrace the name Africa, but from what we are revealing today, it is not something that should be embraced. It needs to be corrected. And maybe that should be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to speak to
What we're
that.
doing today.
We have the authority to repurpose the energy that the word Africa holds.
Okay.
And the repurposing of that is for clarity. Because Akebalon was not just the continent that we call Africa.
Right. Yes.
Akebalon is the whole earth.
Yes.
None.
So when we say Akebalon, we are talking about this land called America, as well as the continent of Africa and every other piece of land on the earth.
I meant to say that, yeah.
So when we say Africa now, we have the authority to repurpose that energy. And what we are repurposing that energy for is clarity. When we talk about the African, we are using that word for clarity's sake, not based upon division. If we were using it based upon division, then we would be speaking of inferiority versus superiority, as opposed to speaking to unity and balance. So when we say African, we are not talking about a group of people who are superior to anyone. We are talking about a mindset that seeks harmony and balance for a Kabbalah. Does that make sense? Which means the whole world.
Yeah. It does, because yeah, you said something I meant to say and forgot to say. To look at the landmass and say we're going to rename this Africa, what you did not see was the spiritual perspective. The spiritual perspective is the whole universe is a Kabbalah. The whole thing is a Kabbalah, and that's something very spiritual. But in my haste to be greedy or take something, I only see this small landmass. In other words, I choose to dominate this thing and not see the bigger picture. And so I rename this and I divide this thing into 50, 60 countries or whatever it was, because I want what I want. I want to dominate this thing, but the love and the compassion and stuff still remains because I did not see the whole thing. I can't, my vision is not there to see the whole thing.
See,
I don't have that.
I see. Yeah. The first immigrants on the face of this earth were Europeans. Africans is not immigrants, never been immigrants. We've always been everywhere. Look at your history. Look at your history. The first immigrants are Europeans. Neanderthals were the first immigrants. And what happened with that? Ever since they became the first immigrants, they've been telling everybody else they are immigrants and taking their land. Nobody in this country is an immigrant other than Europeans. And I'm talking about in terms of the foundations of this country. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about foundationally speaking, the only immigrants are European. The other immigrants were what we call Native American. Africans were already here 65,000 years before any of them got here. Same thing in Australia. Same thing in New Zealand. What it was, in 1789, when the British went into Australia, the first thing they did was hunted down the Aborigines and killed them. So this whole, everywhere they have immigrated to, they sought to commit genocide against the African. The African, whether it was in Australia or in what we call America, it was the African. Whether it was in Haiti or whether it was in Jamaica, the African. Because we were everywhere. So this whole idea of the words of negativity, or the words of minimizing the humanity, we change the meanings of these words because we are the progenitors of all words. Nobody was writing before us. Languages came from us. We gave the Greeks their alphabet, their language. We gave them that. And out of that came the English alphabet and other that we have now. But all of that came from the Rosetta Stone. So if we are the originators of words, if we are the spiritual entities, if we are the gods in this earth, we have the authority. We have the authority to change the energy, to repurpose the energy in any word we choose. And that is a method of bringing balance. The way that shame has been heaped upon those of us who are of African descent is by words, changing Niger to nigger, changing a cash crop of watermelon to a crop of shame because of the way they depicted us eating watermelon. Changing the jockey that sits in the yard from being a symbol of Underground Railroad to being a nigger in my yard. All of these things have been changed for negativity. We have the authority to change to repurpose this energy, and when we repurpose the energy, that is when we begin to see the repurposing of the energy of the Neanderthal bringing balance into this earth. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Any questions about that? I don't think that we realize the depth of authority that we have as Elohim.
Pastor, can I get you to hold on 1 second?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear Pastor?
Yes.
Okay.
Am
Camille,
I
you
talking,
okay?
am I talking loud enough?
I hear him now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we're fine. Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm talking loud enough. Please, if I'm not, let me know.
I will. I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I'm saying is that we talk about being Elohim, but now we are beginning to see what it means. We're beginning to exert the authority that we have by being Elohim. There is no question about us being Elohim. The only one who doubts it is us.
Yeah.
We are the only one who doubt that we are God. And the ones who are Neanderthals know who we are. The person who spoke on that video is Neanderthal. Come on, y'all. Think about that. What did this Neanderthal get what he said? Everything that was said, we have spoken about it. So it was gathered from the macro and brought together in a concise message that covered the depth of femininity, of the femininity rather, of the African. Can you see that? Does that make sense to you? Is that clear? George?
Yes. I wanted to just respond when you mentioned in terms of the Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, and then talking about the Homo sapiens in terms of the distinctions between the Neanderthal and who we are. You know, when you spoke of Africa, you know, there were conquering generals who took Africa and called it by the general's name. So Scipio Africanus
Yes.
was the conquering general who came up with the name Africa, named after him. However, when we speak of, again, Akebalon, I think it's important that we can begin to grasp just to know that as Elohim, you know, the history of us being able to appreciate, as you talk about the Dogons. I mean, even in the video, the gentleman talked about biology. But as we say, it's so above, so below. But I think that we are now, you know, coming and knowing the truth that we can begin to erase the tape in terms of the indoctrination, in terms of how we was taught. And that kind of just made me think about, you know, how the name Africa came into, you know, existence from a standpoint of the Neanderthal of this gentleman who was on the video. Where did he get it from? And so when you talked about the Rosetta Stone, I think it was something Mara talked about in terms of the chief cornerstone when we talk about the Shabaka stone. So I think that there's, you know, a lot that we're still pursuing, but I know and I feel that this is where we are. And so again, I say to Ron, I appreciate as we started in the beginning in terms of not looking so much as in terms of names where we talked about Adam and Eve, but we also talked about good and evil. So I think that there's some spiritual substance that existed because the human life began about 6 million years before the Common Era. And when we get into looking at the Australopithecus, looking at the homos in terms of erectus, there's just so much to be thankful for, but I'm glad that we're talking about this in terms of concepts versus the names. I'm done.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about what George just said?
I tell you one thing that came to mind, what George said. I think what I have tried to do here is not just today, of course, but is appreciate what I'm experiencing when we have our lessons or our sessions. Appreciate what I experience because like today when Audrey asked, "Can somebody sum up yesterday?" That was 24 hours a day. I couldn't sum that up. I heard it and I thought it was a beautiful lesson. In fact, I spoke with Pastor afterwards and told him I thought it was a beautiful lesson. But the next day I can't tell you what was said. And I think that gets in the way of us seeing ourselves as Elohim, is that it resonates with us and we experience it, but it's a lot of stuff to hold on to, and it's not meant to be held on that way. Uh, I think our education may hinder us from realizing or recognizing that if you experience it and it sticks with you, or you in rhythm with it and you agree with it, that's as good as it gets. It comes back to us as we need it. So anyway, I like the Elohim part, or seeing ourselves and understanding that we are God, because I still think we struggle with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the question is this: is there anything too hard for God? Is there anything too hard for Elohim? Is there anything that Elohim cannot do?
Yeah.
And if Elohim cannot repurpose the energy of a word, then what can Elohim do? Because if the Neanderthal can do it and Elohim can't repurpose it, that's the problem. So who's the God?
Yeah.
And that's what we have experienced throughout our lives, and that's what we are still experiencing.
Excuse me.
We are being influenced more than we are influencing. And that has to change. Every time you listen at the news, or every time you listen to something that Trump has said or done, this is not Trump. This is the mindset of the Neanderthal. And every time it bothers you, then you have diminished your power within yourself as being Elohim. You should not be shaken by that if you know who you are. And if you are shaken by that, call someone, because we are our brother's keeper, meaning that if it shakes you and it's something that doesn't shake me, then I am I am the mind of Elohim. And my being the mind of Elohim, you have reverted to your mind that was influenced by the Neanderthal, and it's up to me to help you purge of that thought, that mindset. Does that make sense? Don't be in denial. If it shakes you, deal with it. And if you can't deal with it, call someone. We are Elohim. And we can change all things. We don't let things change us. We change them. They have already had their run at doing that. And look at what the outcome is. We have to look at the foundation of everything that was balanced. We have to look at that. We talk about the imbalance of history repeating itself. We talk about the mindset of the enslaver repeating itself. We talk about the brutality of the Neanderthal repeating itself. But we don't talk about the balance of the African, the history of it repeating itself. We don't talk about the resurgence of beginning. We don't talk about the balance that was in existence from the beginning, prior to there being anyone on this earth other than us. So we are in the process of allowing that history of balance to repeat itself for the express purpose of bringing balance to all of those who came from our genes. We are their gods. We created them. And Elohim is not going to destroy its creation. It's not going to happen. Elohim is going to bring all of creation into balance. And the reason the whole of creation is mourning and groaning is because it has not changed, but our insight as to who we are has changed. We are the African. We are the children of a Kabbalah in this country who are the tip of the spear for change. No one on the continent of Africa, no one in the diaspora other than us can bring this change. None of them. Because none of them have lived and understood the belly of the beast. When the scripture talks about Moses being in Pharaoh's house and understanding the governing nature of Pharaoh and how Pharaoh thinks, no one knows that better than us. That is not talking about a physical Egypt, a physical Pharaoh. It's talking about a mindset. The mindset. We have been in the house. We have lived in the house. We've been enslaved in the house of Pharaoh, of the Neanderthal. We know how he thinks. We know how he processes. We have suffered the pain and sorrow at the hands of the Neanderthal. We know how he thinks. So we are the ones who are to pick up this mantle as we've done and begin to bring history to a place of repeating itself, not from enslavement, but repeating itself from balance in this earth. So all of our children, when you say all of God's children, so all of our children can benefit from who we are, not benefit from who they were or who they can be, but benefit from who we are. It is no coincidence that the central location of life itself is in that place that we call Africa. It is no coincidence that in that central location of this place called Africa, in that central location of life itself, everything that humanity ever needed to survive is in that one place, is on that continent like no other continent on the face of the earth. Why? Because the center of life is not Egypt. The center of life is not Israel. The center of life is the entire continent. It is as though a tree sprung up in the middle of that continent and the branches spread it all over the world. And the fruit of those branches are the different groups of people who don't look externally like each other, but internally have the propensity to be the same. But they cannot be the same if the ones who are the root of the tree don't know who they are, because the fruit that they produce is a fruit that is foreign to them. And that fruit that is foreign to us, we have to we have to use our authority to change what we have been producing from being the limb on that tree. Now, what we are doing, when we talk about going back to beginning, we are tracing that limb that overshadows this piece of land. We are tracing that limb through the leaves, through the branches, through that limb, all the way down the trunk of the tree into the roots of Africa itself, so that we can dig up who we are, embrace it, and then return through that tree for the express purpose of spreading liberation, of spreading spirituality to all of humanity in this earth, so that peace and love and kindness can become the primary fruit that we produce in this tree for everyone. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You can't do that if you don't believe that you're Elohim.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you don't act like you're Elohim. It's not going to happen. It's just that simple. I'm done.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, anyone? Okay. Well, let's put a pin in it for today, give some thought to it, and see if you have any questions tomorrow evening. Okay. Great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your energy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Look forward to
See you
tomorrow.
later. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.